A changing Texas, a changing world. Trouble brews in Europe. The 20th century began with a bang when we discovered oil in Texas in 1910. There were plenty of jobs for everyone, but soon enough, Texans were living through very difficult times. It all started across the ocean in Europe. In 1914, war broke out. Great Britain, France, Italy, and Russia were known as the Allied powers. They joined together against the Central Powers. This included Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. In 1917, the United States joined the Allied powers. About 200,000 Texans became soldiers during World War I. New jobs for Texans. There were many new jobs for Texans during the war. Airplane pilots trained at Texas Air Force bases. Women, who had not worked before, took over the factory jobs that were left when the men went to war. The war was being fought in Europe, but back in Texas, everyone was working to help the Allied powers win. In 1918, the Allied powers did win and the war was over. Life would change in Europe now. It had already begun to change in Texas. The Roaring Twenties. The 1920s were an exciting time of change for Texas and the world. This is when women won the right to vote. In 1924, a woman was elected to be the Texas governor. Miriam Ma Ferguson's husband was the governor of Texas, but he was accused of breaking the law and was removed from office. The people voted to have Mrs. Ferguson take his place. It was exciting that a woman was given the position. There were other exciting changes too. At the end of World War I, factories were no longer needed to make supplies for war. Now they could make products people wanted and needed to buy. Factories hired new workers. The 1920s were roaring with businesses. People felt good about things. Industries were at a peak. People had good jobs, they had extra money to spend. Many people spent their extra money on a new, exciting invention, the automobile. Incredible automobiles. Henry Ford opened the Ford Motor Company in Michigan in 1903. His company used a new manufacturing idea called the assembly line. This helped his company be able to make a new car in only 93 minutes. This was good news. By 1928, more than 250,000 cars and trucks were on the road in Texas. Cars need gasoline to run. Texas had a lot of oil. Gasoline companies built refineries in Texas to manufacture or make the gasoline. Once again, there were lots of jobs available in Texas. This gave the oil industry another boost. Cars also needed good roads to travel on. Companies started building roads and highways to link Texas cities together. People started many new businesses for anything they needed. Times were good. People made and spent their money on homes and some of the new inventions of the century. Industrial Revolution. Scientists and inventors were hard at work during this time period. Every day it seemed there was a new tool or machine that made life easier for people. Refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, radios, and an early television were all created during this time. Factories used new technologies to improve mass production. Workers could produce the many new machines quickly. They each had a different job to do instead of making one machine all alone. This was called division of labor. This process improved speed and performance of workers. Texas businesses made lots of money selling their products to Americans and people in foreign countries. It all came crashing down. During the decade of the 1920s, businesses of all kinds boomed. Americans felt good about the future. People bought stocks in companies. These stocks were shares of ownership. When a company is doing well, their stocks increase in value. People can make a profit or money by buying and selling stocks. Unfortunately, stocks can lose value too. This is what happened in late 1929. In October, the value of many companies' stocks fell. People worried, and many of them tried to sell their stocks. This caused the value of stocks to fall even more. Soon, companies didn't have enough money to stay open. Lots of people lost their jobs. People who had borrowed money to buy stocks could not pay the bank back. Banks who did not get repaid had to close. Some people lost all the money they had. To make matters worse, the nation experienced a severe drought during this time. The earth became very dry, and there were lots of dust storms in Texas. The Great Plains area became known as the Dust Bowl. Crops were ruined, and life was miserable for most people. The Great Depression had settled on Texas as well as the United States. A New Deal to end the Depression. In 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt created a program to help the United States get out of the Great Depression. He called the plan the New Deal. The government gave many people jobs. Workers built dams and repaired roads and bridges. Some workers improved parks and government buildings. Businesses loaned money from the government so they could open again. Not everyone thought the New Deal was good. Some people did not like the power it gave the government, but people were feeling better. Unfortunately, it took a terrible crisis to get the United States in good shape again. World War II. On December 7, 1941, the United States entered World War II. Japan dropped bombs on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Many men signed up to serve in the military. Suddenly, Texas industry was busier than ever. Texas provided most of the gasoline needed for ships, tanks, and planes during the war. Many new jobs were created when factories opened to make supplies for the war in Europe. Once again, many people came to Texas to work. Women and people from Mexico made up a large part of the workforce. The Great Depression is over. When the war ended in 1945, the United States was in good shape again. The Great Depression was over. People had jobs and money to spend. Texas was stronger than ever. It was a leading industry state. The good times seemed to be back.